Okay, today my guest is Professor Len Treviño. I'll keep my introduction short to maximize our time with him. In the next 30 minutes or so, we'll talk about Len as a person. Professor Treviño is a thought leader and an esteemed scholar, and finally as a mentor to many PhD students and junior faculty. For the sake of time, I'll skip many of his accomplishments and give you a very quick snapshot. Professor Treviño is the president of Ibero-American Academy of Management and the IB Program Director at Florida Atlantic University. His research is on the multinational enterprise, foreign direct investment, institutional theory, gender, diversity, and discrimination. Recently, on the strategies he was working on to mitigate the spread of coronavirus and its impact on business. He has published extensively at JIBS, Journal of International Business Policy, International Business Review, Journal of International Management, Asia Pacific Journal of Management, Management International Review, Cross-Cultural Strategic Management, International Journal of Human Resource Management, and AIB Insights, among others. Len is very active at AIB conferences. So thank you, Len, for joining us.
My pleasure. I'm delighted to be here, Ilgas.
Len, what did you want to become when you were a child?
Well, if we think of when I was a child, I think it's mostly fantasy. I didn't think about a doctor or a lawyer, but I really like to play superheroes, and we always choose which one we want to be. I was Thor, so I thought if I could fly through the air and save people, that would be an interesting career. After that, a little bit later on, I really love sports, and especially baseball. So I really practiced, and I'd like to become a Major League Baseball pitcher. Unfortunately, I was a bit of had a late growth spurt. When I got my driver's license at 16 years old, I was still 5 feet 5 inches tall and about less than 120 pounds. Now I'm 6 feet 1. And maybe if I had grown earlier, I would have had a chance to realize my dream of being a pitcher.
It's funny. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in South Bend, Indiana, which is where Notre Dame is, where I went to school for undergraduate.
And can you remember the earliest moment of awareness between foreign versus domestic?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was influenced by my parents, obviously, and they both had European backgrounds. My father, French and Spanish, and my mother, he was first generation, and my mother was second generation German Irish. And, my father grew up in Mexico. And so I have a lot of relatives that were Mexican, and I interacted with a lot of Mexican people in South Bend when I was growing up. So I learned to speak Spanish and appreciate the culture of foreign countries at an early age. So that's where I noticed the difference very early in life of cultures and having that European and especially Mexican influence.
How did you choose academia?
Oh, well, I think it was really not what I chose. It was by a process of elimination. When I went to Notre Dame, I wanted to become a president. I studied finance, and then I worked at General Electric. I just felt something wasn't right. I enjoyed it. I knew the technical aspects of finance. And then after I did my MBA, I tried again at Leo Burnett Advertising. I worked on Pop-Tarts and new products, introduced the Nutri-Grain bars. And every time I was doing something international along with that, when I was studying marketing at Indiana University, I studied also international business. And so when I got to Leo Burnett, it was like, yeah, this is fun. This is cool. Everyone would kill to have this job in advertising. And yet something didn't feel right. And so once again, I went back to school, and I thought, well, I'll get a Ph.D. I always liked to write. And then when I got there, it took me a little while to shift and see that, yeah, this is a good career for me. And so I finally accepted that I was going to become an academic. Later on, I really loved it and realized that it was just a fabulous fit. But I would say, once again, it was a process of elimination.
Interesting. So you actually gave up modern day madman.
Yes, I was trying to be the next Darren Stevens or Madman executive. And, it was a great company in Chicago downtown and working on the Kellogg's account. And I enjoyed it. The creative process was there as you're mixing business, working with artists and copywriters. And, it was a cool place to work, but I don't know. It just didn't feel right for me.
Perfect. Something that is not on your CV that people might find interesting.
Well, I love to do yoga. I would say I'm an advanced Iyengar yoga practitioner, and I can do some pretty interesting asanas or poses, such as I can put my leg behind my head, basically, and I can do a side crow where the legs are extended out to the side, and side crow or side crane. It's called Parsa Bakasana. And so I love yoga, and I do it to kind of balance myself out because I'm pretty high energy. I like to lift weights. I like to do long distance and endurance activities like cycling. But I had to learn that I needed to balance that out with some sort of meditation and yoga, other kinds of things that involved breathing and things.
Interesting. If you stopped doing what you're doing and choose a second career path, alternative career path, what would it be?
I think I could have been a pretty good actor. It sounds like one of those fantasy ideals, but I think if I had put my mind to it, I could have been some kind of actor. I usually get confused with an actor you may know about. It's Christopher Walken. And one time sometimes some people think I'm his son or something like that. And I think it's more like his speech and his mannerisms and things of that nature. And then sometimes William Dafoe, but who played the Green Goblin on Spider-Man series. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think acting would be a fun career and something that I could be passionate about.
Sure. I remember him in The English Patient with the no thumbs. That was a good movie.
Yeah.
Regrets? Have you got any regrets?
Not really any regrets, but if I think back to, for instance, my finishing up my doctoral program, Hans Thorelli, who was a famous marketing professor and international business, more marketing, but he was really a superstar. And he advised me to stay a couple of extra years working on. I left 3 years. I left after 3 years at Indiana with ABD, and I came back from a skiing trip in France in my 3rd year. This was before the internet, and there was a note on my desk, and the University of Miami wants to speak with you, and so they invited me down for an interview, offered me the job, and I thought, well, I'm not making very much money here, and I can go to Miami and get out of poverty, basically. And so Hans's advice was very sage, and I might have thought about sticking around and working with him and others at Indiana for a couple of more years. But we do the best we can in life, and I don't have too many regrets.
Perfect. What are you most passionate about?
I'm passionate about music. I'm passionate about creativity. I'm passionate about solving world problems. And when I think about passion, I like to try my best to contribute to what I'm passionate about. And I can talk about some of those things, but I also like to experience other people's passions. So for example, when I talk about music, I could think about world-class musicians. Who's the best drummer in the world? Well, I think as far as rock goes, I like rock music. I would look to John Bonham at Led Zeppelin, a previous rock band. And John Bonham, he's one of those people where, Led Zeppelin, after he died, they disbanded. They couldn't go on. Any other band would just pick up another drummer. But he was in a class by himself. You could look to Jimi Hendrix. I think he was the greatest guitarist, rock guitarist ever. There were other styles of guitars. I like beer, and and I learned about different beers as I grew up, and I became more sophisticated. But I'm just amazed at that what the Trappist monks from Belgium can produce. And they've been doing it since the 6th century, and they produce just amazing beers or wine. I don't even drink beer or wine. I don't drink other stuff, but you know what the Australians did with Grange wine to compete with the French and Bordeaux. And somebody who can produce a $600 or $700 or $800 bottle of wine every year, one after another, not regarding the terroir, the weather. I think that's really cool. And I like to experience what somebody did with their creativity. Writers we could talk about: Hemingway, Dostoevsky, Shakespeare, etc. I'd love to read how they can put words together and make it so interesting. Scientists, I mean, Einstein, Marie Curie, just world-class people. I'm passionate about trying to be motivated by their accomplishments and make some small accomplishments, not on their scale, but the best I can do.
Perfect. Let's switch to research and let's continue with creativity idea. How do you define creativity? What does your mind think of in a state of idle curiosity? How does the process work for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And first of all, I almost never outline a paper. I just think when I have it up here, I can put it down on the paper. And after I read enough papers, and sometimes it's in the hundreds or even 200 papers, then I have enough knowledge to be able to try to stand on the shoulders of giants. But it cannot be forced. You can learn and you can try and you can write. But I've learned over the past 10 or 15 years that sometimes you just have to put what you want to do in the back of your mind. And then your unconscious can come up with great answers to problems. For instance, I have a dog, and he's a great dog, and he needs to be walked twice a day. And sometimes I'll walk with him, and all of a sudden I have a great idea. It's happened like 5, 6 times in the last 2 or 3 years. And then I come home and I'll write it down. So I think there's a conscious activity to creating, and there's also an unconscious element to being creative. But what I try to do is also think about, when I think about an outline, it's in my head, what is the flow, the rhythm of the process? How does that kind of come about? And also, the way I think about, if we want to say creativity and writing a paper, I think we all start with a blank canvas, right? And that blank canvas may be in your mind, it may be on a piece of paper, whether we're making beer or whether we are cooking or whether we're painting, we all start with a blank canvas. And I have the same, maybe I don't have all the same, but I have the same words in my mind and my vocabulary, the same mathematical symbols as somebody else. And if I can combine those words in such a way that makes a novel creative contribution, well, then I'm all set. The same way that Van Gogh painted stuff and had the same access to all the different watercolors and paper and canvas and brushes than anybody else had, but Van Gogh was a genius. And he put them in such a way that nobody else could do. So that's the way I look at creativity and the writing process. And I feel if I can do that in such a novel way and arrange those words and mathematical symbols accordingly, then I can make a novel contribution.
Beautiful. Asli and I have a paper in AMR on the creativity, the process of creativity. And I like to ask this question about how my guests talk about or think about creation versus discovery. And you put it very nicely. Let me ask you, do you work every day? Do you have to sit in front of a laptop every day?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like to read a lot of news, so I spend a lot of time keeping up on the world and the way the world works. And I I've heard different people talk about that. One friend of mine said he works 6 hours a day on writing every day. Um, I try to work mostly every day, even on the weekends, I do a little bit. But I also find sometimes I just need to take a break. And now it's sort of in one of those times. It was mostly a few weeks ago. I'm ready to get back at it. Just to give my mind a chance to relax and recuperate, because I think it's really important. It's also important for me to exercise and go running and do some physical activity and try not to think about anything. I don't get any ideas. I don't think I get any ideas when I'm engaged in exercise or physical activity, even yoga, because I'm so focused on what I'm doing. But when I'm walking with the dog, I'm not thinking about anything. Stuff pops in and it's boom, wow, that's a really cool idea. Yeah, so I just love the creative process, doing theory, and it's a pleasure. I don't know. I wasn't passionate like this about things when I was doing the business jobs and stuff. Although I do like to consult from time to time and things, but thinking about theory is it's exciting.
How do you explain your research and the importance of it? Well, these are Muse is right there. How do you explain the importance of your research to people who don't read your work regularly? And
The process of research and theory?
how do you explain it to people who don't read academic work?
Oh, I see. Well, I can just explain to people that, what I like to do as far as my job. They ask me, well, what do you do, professor? Most people just think you teach a lot of classes. I say a big part of my job is doing research. It's thinking about some of the world's problems, like immigration or like climate change, or, as you mentioned, pandemics and how to control the spread of pandemics. And I try to build models and write theory to try to resolve some of these issues. I guess that's the easiest way to explain it to, for instance, a layperson.
About omitted areas of research, things that we should cover more of, neglected areas of inquiry. What would those be?
Well, in IB, I think, we could look at the process of internationalization. And in the 60s and 70s, early 70s, scholars were mostly looking at flows of investment from a country level kind of thing. With one of the scholars was Aliber, and he looked at that issue in 1970. Then in the Heimer was actually a little bit earlier, but he got published in 1976, and he looked at the multinational enterprise as more of that unit of analysis. So it moved from the macro to the country level to the firm level. And then after that, it was Johansen and Valney looked at the international process theory kind of thing. But what they did not examine, and they called a black box, was the underlying processes, the decision-making that led to that investment. So we covered that in a recent Gibbs article in this discourse-based view. And so I think one of the things that, two areas I think we need to look at as far as internationalization is concerned. One is these management decision-making and getting at the person as the unit of analysis to discover these underlying decision-making mechanisms that lead to an investment in the first place. But second, it's related to these United Nations so-called 17 grand challenges. And for these great problems such as climate change, migration, gender inequality, I believe we need coordination between public and private partnerships and multinational enterprises to really take some of this on, because it's too great of a problem for even governments to tackle.
About the discourse-based view, how do you see it evolve into a bigger line of research in the next 5 to 10 years? What's the future of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things we talked about in the discourse-based view of internationalization was that discourse is fairly well developed in the management field. There's a lot of papers there, and to a little bit lesser extent in strategy, and not so much in international business. So I think we can use this viewpoint, the discourse-based view, to examine what companies say. In other words, with talk and texts, we can understand what the company is. We can pinpoint when the investment was made, why it was made, and we can examine power relations within a company. I think the power and discourse has a lot to do with who wins out in the phase of where to invest and when to invest. So it's just something that we believe can be developed not only in internationalization process theory, but also in, for instance, international entrepreneurship and other areas. So it's just not as well developed as we believe it could be in international business. So we hope that paper will also spur additional discourse research in international business.
And you had a classical training, and then you got into a lot of interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary areas, and now the new things like the spread of coronavirus, the immigrants, immigration, and the impact of these challenges on business. What was the thought? What's your thought on interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary research in IB?
Well, I think it's certainly something that differentiates international business from other fields, as is the current point by Guinness that's in it's in the online first now on JIBS. So this is maybe a contentious point, but I think interdisciplinary is one of those elements that distinguishes international business. But also, I think personally, and from my perspective, I probably didn't take the advice when someone said you should stick to the knitting and stick to one thing and do it very well. I become interested in lots of different things. And if someone had told me 20 years ago that I would be doing research on gender, diversity, and inclusion, I would have thought they were nuts. And yet here I am. I got involved with someone else, got me involved in a paper, and then I took off with some stuff, and now I'm an expert on gender, and I like it. But what I like about multidisciplinary is you can go where you need to go, whether it's political economy, whether it's immigration literature, whether it's biology, or whatever it is, to help you explain a phenomenon and to contribute to that literature. So international business scholarship gives you the ability to go wherever you need to go to solve problems. And personally, what I find very interesting is trying to contribute to the resolution of grand challenges and to make society a better place. In that case, I really feel passionate about disenfranchised people, whether it's women or minorities or poor countries that feel the brunt of climate change, even though they don't contribute as much to climate change as rich countries. So I feel that somebody has to speak up for disenfranchised people. And at this stage in my career, trying to solve grand challenges is one of the things that I want to try and do.
Well, I mean, you're working on these new topics, and in your opinion, which IB questions are overly studied? There is no much mileage out of studying these things anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I could say institutional theory, because that's probably the one that is most studied in international business, but I certainly think there's more mileage there, so I can't say that it should not be studied anymore. But I would say more toward a balance between quantitative and qualitative. And I've done both research. I've done qualitative and I've done quantitative. And I think, and I review qualitative papers. One of the things we have to be very careful about is to make sure that the research processes, the documentation of the evolution of theory and thematic content analysis is very strictly documented, because people are going to take shots at qualitative research and say it's not as rigorous. Well, it can be even more rigorous than quantitative research. But doctoral students become so immersed in quantitative methods in the doctoral program that we forget about some of the qualitative kind of elements of that. So I would like to see, rather than say extinguish institutional theory or extinguish quantitative, just maybe create a more of a balance between quantitative and qualitative studies.
Perfect. Now this brings us to advice portion. What are some of the most common mistakes that you see junior faculty or PhD students make, and what are the do's and don'ts according to you?
Well, one thing, I'm working with a doctoral student right now, and she's very good, and I think she's going to be able to put out some good work. So I got her involved in helping me to review a paper, just so she could get some experience, kind of a thing. Of course, I'll take responsibility for it, but I just wanted her to get some responsibility. And she's developing a survey instrument. And I always cautioned her to make sure you don't leave anything out of the survey. Wait, test it, get some advice, ask other people, because if you leave it out, you can't go back and get it. You cannot go back and get it. And I'm reviewing a paper where I think they left something out, and she's helping me review the paper. So she saw that and learned the lesson by doing this work, kind of a thing. So that's one thing I would tell students, is to make sure you have a very complete survey instrument before you send it out. The next thing I think one thing PhD students, junior scholars tend to do is they either underestimate their capabilities. Rarely, but sometimes I see some that overestimate their skills and capabilities. And you have to believe in your work. You have to believe in your work. If you don't believe in it, nobody's going to. And I'm passionate about it. I believe in my work. Now, it doesn't always get into the journal I want to get it into, because the process is random, or the work's not good enough, or whatever. I'm a firm believer in the market, in the marketplace. But when I talk about believing in your work, don't give up. And I'll give some students or junior faculty an example. My co-authors and I published a paper in a top-tier management journal recently, and we were rejected 5 or 6 times from top-tier management journals. And one of my co-authors said to me after the 5th time or 6th time, so, well, I guess we better drop down to this journal. I don't want to mention any journals. And I said, nope, there's one more on the table, and we're going after that top-tier journal. I believed in the work, and I thought there were some political components to us getting rejected, and we got it in. So I persevere. Thick skin, we all hear about that. I mean, doctoral students, you've got to get a thick skin. How do you get a thick skin? With practice. You get it with practice. We all get papers rejected, everybody, and we all get rejected more times than we get accepted. And now it doesn't even faze me. It's like, okay, I got rejected. It's a random process. And maybe the next time I'll get lucky.
Every time you get a rejection, it's the end of the world. Still the next morning, and there's another new day.
The sun comes up. I can walk down to the beach. It's less than a mile from here, and I just try again. I just try again.
You're right, but we must say something about good associate editors and editors that really make the paper, push the paper, help the paper versus very difficult and sometimes unreasonable referees.
Yes, it's exactly true. As a referee, I think I'm tough but fair. I try to never give authors a moving target. I try to be straight, and I try to throw everything at them in the first round. Something may come up, of course. And if I see the paper, I think it can be better, and I think it's publishable, I still want to really push them to create something better, just like I get pushed. Just give you a quick example. In that COVID paper we published, the editor, I don't know if I can mention a name or something.
Yep.
Yeah, Dana Minbaeva, she did a great job. Of course, it's public information, and she and her team of reviewers really pushed us to create a paper and to keep it succinct enough and to make a contribution. And we saw that they liked the paper, but it was a lot of work. It was a great deal of work, and we ended up having to do a 3-way interaction. And it was tough. It was tough, but we got it done. And I think most of the times reviewers aren't out to screw you. They're there to help you. They're giving you their best feedback. And if most of the time when I get rejected, I say, yeah, that's a pretty good review. They're correct. Once in a while, I don't agree, but I move on. This is the business that we've chosen, as the mobster said in The Godfather. This is the business. It was Hyman Roth. This is the business that we've chosen. This is the way it works. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
Any advice for mid-career people after tenure?
After tenure? Well, get used to a little more service. This is the first thing. After tenure, you can take a little bit of a break, but depending upon what kind of school you're at, in order to get full professor, they want to see, I've heard pre-tenure ×2 from some of my colleagues at top 100 schools. And so just keep doing what you're doing. You did enough to get tenure, and you'll be successful. Find out what you're passionate about. Maybe try to increase your network. Reach out to people. Don't be afraid to cold call. I've done some cold calls with authors who've turned out to be great friends and co-authors. And I want to work with the best people, and just reach out to them. All they can do is say no. And most of the time they say yes when I reach out. And create your network, especially as you're going up for full, because about 7% of papers in top tier management journals are published by single authors, about 7%. So you need to focus on what it is you do best and find co-authors who can complement that. I used to do my own methods and working by myself and doing everything. Now I work with people like Carolyn Egri, Herman Aguinas, and they're world-class methodologists. Why would I bother? I just work on perfecting the theory and pointing out things with methods as it comes up and this and that. But I truly believe in specialization in order to have a better chance at these journals with high rejection rates.
Perfect. Thank you. Len, what's the question that I should have asked you but haven't?
Maybe just, I guess for junior faculty, or maybe even mid assistants, professors, how do I manage research, teaching, and service? Because you have to be good at all three in order to get tenure. And I would say, yes, of course, we understand you're not going anywhere without the research. This is very important. But I've seen a couple of cases in recent years about some people who had problems with the teaching, a little bit of problems with the teaching. Nothing that could not be overcome, but don't forget to be an excellent teacher, be passionate about your teaching, and give students everything you have in the classroom, And just like you do with your research, be passionate about it. And with respect to service, do the best you can. You should be shielded from service early on, but as an associate professor, be ready to contribute more. So don't forget about the other two things. But get networks, find people that are passionate about the same things you're passionate about, and you can work together and you have fun together, kind of a thing. So I would advise students just to have fun. You picked a great career. People advised me when I went back to get my Ph.D., oh, the glory days are over. It's not the greatest profession anymore. I think it's a fabulous profession. I love what I do, and I get paid to travel around the world and paid to work with super smart people and write papers and hang out. And so enjoy your career.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this very interesting and candid interview. I learned a lot. I'm sure the audience will agree with me. Thank you, Len.
Thanks for doing that, guys. I appreciate it.